Let's have a short recap of what we've learned from the first Formula One test in 2022. Unsurprisingly, the drivetrains proved to be very reliable, because the regulations here did not change. But Alpine, for example, did a huge concept change for their engine and switched to the Mercedes-inspired split-turbo and water-to-air intercooling. In terms of aerodynamics, we could see that teams tried to understand the cars and used the brakes on all 3 days of testing. We saw mostly clean flowbiz on all cars, only Alfa Romeo showed some messy beam wing flow. Right now, teams have very different aero concepts. There are two main topics: pushing the front rear wake outboard and getting as much clean air to the back as possible. Some teams focus more on keeping the front rear wake outside. These are the teams with large side pods like Red Bull, Aston Martin, Ferrari, Alpine, AlphaTauri, Alfa Romeo and Haas. But a large side pod blocks the flow path to the back for clean air, so teams have different systems for getting energy to the rear. Aston Martin and Alfa Romeo use a large undercut, so that air can flow underneath the side pod almost straight to the back. Ferrari has almost no undercut, but uses internal ducting to guide clean air through the bodywork. Alpine combines large side pods and downwash, so they keep the wake outboard for as long as possible and pull the bodywork down to drag clean air downwards towards the rear. AlphaTauri uses basically the same concept, but they have more aggressive outwashing side pods and an extremer undercut. The Red Bull takes the AlphaTauri concept further and combines large side pods, downwash and internal ducting. These ducts also have the advantage that the air comes from the side pod inlet, so the middle of the car, which is less sensitive to yaw. So if a team is using large side pods and internal ducting like Red Bull and Ferrari, they could have advantages in corners to bring clean air to the beam wing. The Haas uses large side pods as well, but we cannot see either a large undercut, downwash or internal ducting. The other three teams are Mercedes, Williams and McLaren. All three of them chose, in contrast to the previous group, to design very tight bodyworks. So instead of guiding air to the back with ducts or through large undercuts, these teams have nothing in the way towards the back, so nothing can obstruct the flow, but also nothing is keeping the wake away under yaw. It's the concept that worked with previous regulations, but there was lots of freedom in the bargeboard area to push the front rear wake outside. So the question for these teams is, if they can manage to keep the front rear wake outside, although they have such a narrow bodywork. The Mercedes has a super tight package underneath and uses very wide side pods with additional extension on top, declared as mirror rear stay, to push the wake outside. The Williams has a similar concept, but it looks like they don't use the full width of the rack box for their bodywork. But Williams has a duct within their side pod, which they can use to blow the upper front rear wake outside. Since the upper air intake for this is larger than the outlet, we can assume that the velocity at the outlet will be higher. But Williams didn't always use this duct and also closed it during testing, so it will be interesting to see if they will use it at the first race. McLaren is another team with narrow side pods, but unlike the Mercedes, they don't use the full width of the rack box, and unlike Williams, they don't have ducting underneath to help with outwash. Also, in contrast to Mercedes and Williams, they don't use a downwashing bodywork. But they take air from the center floor and guide it up and around the side pods. So it remains to be seen if they can actually keep the front rear wake outside enough, and if they can get as much clean to the back as others. Bouncing was probably the biggest technical challenge that teams faced during testing. It's a 40-year-old problem of ground effect cars. The underbody creates lots of suction on the straight and sucks the car to the ground, until it's too close and chokes the diffuser. The car suddenly loses downforce and goes up, and the cycle starts again. The suction is so strong that it bends the outer floor edge down, which then seals the underbody and makes things worse. Some teams remembered that from the past and prepared their cars for it. Other teams were already working on updates before the test started, and some were surprised and unprepared. Alfa Romeo, for example, said that they didn't see it coming. They damaged their car with bouncing, struggled to find a setup that works, and hence lost a lot of running time. So why did teams not see it coming in CFD or wind tunnel? In CFD you use a rigid volume for your car that doesn't bend. If you investigate bending, like for the front wing, you need to have real track data of it first, so you can model it in CFD. But geometries in CFD stay stiff. And in the wind tunnel, teams use a 60% model of their Formula 1 car, which means that all thin surfaces, like the floor, are even thinner. To still make these parts stiff enough so they don't break where the wind tunnel is running, these floors on the model are usually made out of machined metal. So they are super strong at the wind tunnel model, and bending like at the real car will never happen. It looks like that at least for the first few races, bouncing will be the key area to solve. Who solves this problem will be faster on the track. You can do this in two ways. You can solve it aerodynamically, or you can adjust your setup for it. Aerodynamically, you can try to avoid the bending of the floor edges, which Haas and Mercedes did with the reinforcement stay, which is just a quick and dirty fix. Or you can try to make sure that even if the floor is bending and touching the ground, air can still flow underneath the car. It seems like the slotted floor of the McLaren does that nicely. Adjusting the car would mean that you run a stiffer suspension to avoid the underbody from getting too close to the ground. But that's costly in low-speed corners because a softer suspension would give you more grip. Ferrari, on the other hand, runs the car relatively high and soft. Alfa Romeo said they will also drive the car higher now. So it will be interesting to see which updates teams will bring to the second test and the following race. Teams need to solve the bouncing first to be able to show their real performance on track. So I hope you liked this little insight and see you at the next video.